Bring me Steven Seagal. The roar ripped through the Apex Coliseum, a challenge hurled from the blood-splattered canvas. Kaelen the Goliath cross, a 2.5-meter Titan fresh off a brutal knockout, snatched the microphone. He pointed a monstrous finger toward the VIP balcony where the 60-year-old martial arts legend sat, an immovable statue in a sea of chaos. Let's see if that fossil wants to face a real fighter. The crowd erupted, a mix of shock and mockery. But Seagal's silence was louder than any roar. Before I show you exactly what happened in that cage, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. The response from a legend like this is something you don't want to miss. Now, let's get into it. The air in the arena was thick with the scent of electricity and sweat, moments before the challenge that would set the world on fire. The moment began with a sickening thud. Kaelen Cross's opponent hit the canvas like a sack of cement, his consciousness extinguished by a punch that seemed to carry the weight of a collapsing building. The referee waved it off, and Kaelen threw his massive arms into the air, a modern-day colossus surveying his conquered territory. The lights of the Apex Coliseum burned down on his glistening, chiseled physique, every muscle a testament to raw, untamed power. He had just extended his undefeated record, but tonight, victory wasn't enough. He craved a legacy, and he knew exactly how to forge it. Ignoring the announcer, he ripped the microphone away, his eyes scanning the opulent VIP section until they locked on his target. Steven Seagal sat beside his granddaughter, Ilera, and his lifelong friend, Dr. Kenji Tanaka. He looked down upon the octagon with an expression of profound stillness. He hadn't come for the spectacle. He was here as a guest of the promoters, a quiet observer of a sport that had evolved into a theater of brute force. When Kaelen's voice, amplified to a deafening volume, boomed through the speakers, every camera in the arena swiveled in unison, away from the victor and toward the legend. I'm tired of these pretenders. I want a real name. Hell, bring me Steven Seagal. Let's see if your Aikido tricks work on 280 pounds of pure muscle, old man. The crowd's reaction was a tidal wave of noise, boos from martial arts purists, derisive laughter from younger fans who only knew Seagal from his films, and shocked gasps from everyone in between. The disrespect was palpable. Kaelen was not just challenging a man. He was mocking an entire era, a philosophy of combat that prioritized technique over sheer size. He reveled in the chaos, his grin widening as he gestured directly at Seagal. There he is, the living fossil. Come on down, or admit you're just a relic hiding behind movie magic. Ilera flinched, her hand instinctively going to her grandfather's arm. Dr. Tanaka adjusted his glasses, a frown creasing his brow. But Seagal remained unmoved. His eyes, deep-set and unblinking, betrayed no anger, no amusement. He simply watched, his composure an invisible shield against the verbal onslaught. This refusal to engage, this profound silence in the face of such blatant provocation, became the most powerful response of the night. It was the calm at the center of a hurricane, and it infuriated Kaelen more than any counter-insult could have. Within seconds, the digital world exploded. Phones were already held high, streaming the raw, unscripted drama. On social media, the clip went viral with hashtags like hashtag Goliath vs. Legend and hashtag Seagal challenged. Memes were born instantly. Kaelen's snarling face juxtaposed with a serene, meditating Seagal. Sports analysts, MMA fighters, and Hollywood celebrities began weighing in. Was it a brilliant marketing stunt, or the most arrogant act in the history of combat sports? The debate raged, fueling a global firestorm of opinion. The fight Kaelen had just won was already forgotten. This challenge was now the only story that mattered. Backstage, the contrast sharpened. Kaelen was swarmed by a mob of reporters, his voice hoarse as he repeated his taunts into a forest of microphones. He's got nothing left. He's an actor. I'll break him in half for the whole world to see. He was high on the adrenaline and the attention, every word a calculated move to build his own myth. Meanwhile, Seagal rose from his seat with a slow, deliberate grace. He gave Alera's hand a reassuring squeeze and nodded to Dr. Tanaka. Ignoring the frantic shouts of journalists trying to get a quote, they were escorted out through a private corridor. As they walked down the quiet, sterile hallway, the distant roar of the crowd faded behind them. Alera finally spoke, her voice tight with concern. "You're not actually going to entertain this, are you?" Seagal didn't answer immediately. He just kept walking, his broad shoulders filling the corridor, a silent, imposing figure moving away from the noise. His departure wasn't a retreat, it was a statement. The giant had made his move. Now, the world held its breath, waiting to see if the mountain would respond. The press conference a few days later was less a media event and more a collision of two separate realities. The ballroom at the Bellagio was packed, the air crackling with anticipation. Kaelen Cross arrived first, making an entrance designed for maximum impact. He wore a custom Givenchy hoodie that strained against his colossal frame, a thick diamond Cuban link chain resting on his chest. Flanked by his entourage, he slumped into his chair, propped his custom Air Jordans on the table, and put on a pair of dark sunglasses, the picture of defiant arrogance. He fed the reporters exactly what they wanted, sound bites dripping with contempt. "I'm the future of fighting," he sneered. "That man belongs in a museum, next to the dinosaurs. He's a movie star who played a tough guy. I'm a tough guy." Then, Steven Seagal entered. The chaotic energy in the room immediately shifted. He wore a simple, high-collared black silk jacket and moved with an economy of motion that commanded attention without demanding it. He took his seat, folded his hands on the table, and for a full minute, simply observed the room in silence. The barrage of camera flashes didn't make him blink. When a reporter finally asked if he was taking this circus seriously, Seagal leaned slightly toward the microphone. His voice was low, yet it carried to every corner of the room. "A hurricane has the power to destroy everything," he began, his tone measured and calm. "But the mountain does nothing. It simply stands. After the storm has exhausted its fury, the mountain remains." The room fell quiet. The reporters, so used to trash talk and bravado, were momentarily stunned by the philosophical redirection. Kaelen scoffed loudly, but the impact was made. Seagal wasn't there to trade insults. He was there to teach. The contrast was cemented when Kaelen, in a moment of pure theater, pulled out a glossy photo of a younger Seagal from one of his iconic films and theatrically tore it in half. "That's your legacy," he roared. Seagal simply watched, his expression unchanged, as if observing a petulant child. This philosophical divide extended to their training. Kaelen's gym was a temple of modern excess. Heavy metal music blasted from speakers as he powered through his workouts for a crew of cameras filming a pre-fight documentary. The footage was spectacular. Kaelen leg pressing a small car's worth of weight, flipping tractor tires, and knocking out sparring partners with jarring force. It was a carefully curated image of a monster being forged in fire. His veteran coach, Mickey Sledge Sullivan, watched with growing unease. "You're training for the cameras, kid, not for the man," Mickey grumbled one afternoon, dabbing Kaelen's face with a towel. "This ain't one of your usual brawlers. He's not going to stand there and let you hit him. He's going to use all that, this," Mickey gestured at Kaelen's massive, straining muscles, "against you." Kaelen just laughed it off. "Relax, Mickey. He's 60 years old. I'm going to give the people a show they'll never forget. This is about entertainment as much as it is about fighting." Meanwhile, Seagal's dojo was a world away. Tucked in a quiet corner of the city, it was a space defined by simplicity and tradition. The air smelled of cypress wood and history. There were no cameras, no blaring music, only the soft sound of feet on the tatami mats. Here, Seagal practiced the slow, circular, flowing movements of Aikido. It wasn't about building strength, but about understanding it. Alera would often sit and watch, her admiration mixed with a deep-seated fear. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she'd say softly. He would pause, his breathing controlled, and reply, "I am not training to be young, Alera. I am training to be aware." This young man mistakes noise for strength. He believes power is something you impose. I must remind him that true power is something you guide. Dr. Tanaka would visit, running medical checks and offering quiet counsel. His raw physical output is off the charts, Steven. A single clean hit could be catastrophic. Seagal would simply nod. That is why he must not be allowed to land one. You do not stop a flood with a dam. You redirect it into a new channel where it can find its own peace. His preparation was a mental and spiritual exercise, a deep dive into the principles that had guided his entire life. He was preparing not for a brawl, but for a lesson. As the fight drew nearer, Kaelen Cross fully submerged himself in the persona he had created. He wasn't just a fighter anymore. He was a Las Vegas attraction. The spotlight he had craved now followed him everywhere, and he bathed in its glow. Nights were spent in the VIP sections of exclusive clubs, champagne bottles popping, surrounded by a rotating cast of admirers and hangers-on. He saw his face on every television screen, his name on the lips of every pundit. The adoration was a drug, and he was becoming an addict. He was winning the fight in the court of public opinion long before stepping into the cage. And in his mind, that was the only victory that mattered. This delusion started to rot his discipline from the inside out. He'd show up late to training, his eyes heavy from the night before, going through the motions with a distracted air. Mickey Sullivan's frustration boiled over. He cornered Kaelen in the locker room one morning, away from the ever-present cameras. "Listen to me, son." The old coach's voice was a low growl. "You're treating this like a coronation. This man you're about to face, he lives by a code you don't even understand. He's forgotten more about leverage and balance than you'll ever know. While you're out there popping bottles, he's in some quiet room, becoming one with his own shadow. You mock his philosophy, but that philosophy is his weapon." Kaelen ripped off his gloves and threw them into his locker. "Philosophy doesn't stop a freight train, Mickey. I'm a freight train. People aren't paying to see a debate. They're paying to see a demolition. And I'm going to give it to them." Mickey just shook his head, the deep lines on his face etched with a grim sense of foreboding. He was training a body, but the mind he needed to reach was already lost in the neon haze of Vegas. In stark contrast, Steven Seagal retreated further into seclusion. His world shrank to the four walls of his dojo. He was a ghost, invisible to the media circus his opponent was so gleefully conducting. His days fell into a monastic rhythm. Meditation at dawn, hours of slow, repetitive practice, followed by quiet evenings with Alara and Kenji. His training was less about physical conditioning and more about achieving a state of absolute presence. He practiced blindfolded, learning to feel the subtle shifts in air current created by a training partner's movement. He stood under a cold waterfall, controlling his breath until the icy shock became a mere sensation. This was not preparation for a sport. It was the sharpening of a lifetime of martial discipline. One evening, Alara sat with him, her fear for his safety a palpable presence in the quiet room. "I've been watching his training videos," she whispered. "He looks unstoppable. I'm scared for you." Seagal placed his hand over hers. "Do not be afraid of the storm, Alara. Be the mountain. The storm is loud and violent, but it is temporary. The mountain is silent, and it is eternal. He will bring the storm. I will be the mountain." The city itself became a pressure cooker of anticipation. Massive digital billboards on the Las Vegas Strip displayed a tale of two fighters. On one side, a roaring, monstrous image of Kaelen Cross, muscles bulging. On the other, a calm, black and white portrait of Seagal, his eyes seeming to hold ancient secrets. The betting lines were astronomically skewed, with Kaelen being a 50-1 favorite. TV analysts screamed at each other in heated debates. Was it the biggest mismatch in history or the ultimate test of technique versus power? The narrative had transcended sport. It was a cultural event. The night before the fight, the city buzzed with an almost frantic energy. Kaelen was the guest of honor at a massive pre-fight party, a rooftop club, the bass of the music thumping like a giant heartbeat. He stood on a balcony overlooking the glittering city, raising a glass to the cheering crowd below, a king surveying his kingdom. Miles away, in the serene quiet of his dojo, Seagal lit a single stick of incense. He performed one final, slow kata, his movements as fluid as smoke. He turned to Alara and Kenji, a profound peace in his eyes. The outcome, he said softly, was decided the moment he chose noise over silence. All that is left is the lesson. Fight night arrived like a lightning strike. The Apex Coliseum was a cauldron of human energy, a roaring, pulsating entity hungry for spectacle. Kaelen Cross's entrance was a masterpiece of modern gladiatorial theater. The arena plunged into darkness, then erupted in strobing lights and pillars of fire. A thunderous heavy metal anthem shook the very foundations of the building as Kaelen emerged from the tunnel, draped in a robe of black and gold. He strode to the cage with a predatory swagger, roaring at the crowd, beating his chest, a god of war, demanding worship. He was feeding on the chaotic energy, absorbing it, becoming its physical embodiment. When he stepped into the octagon, he was less a man and more a force of nature. Then, everything stopped. The music cut out. The fire jets died. The lights dimmed to a single, stark white spotlight focused on the entrance tunnel. And into that circle of light, Steven Seagal appeared. There was no music, no entourage, no robe. He wore a simple black GI and walked with a slow, unhurried pace. The arena, which had been a wall of sound moments before, fell into a stunned, uneasy silence. The sudden quiet was more jarring than any noise. It was as if he had brought his dojo's stillness with him, imposing it upon 20,000 screaming people. He entered the cage, gave a slight, respectful bow to the four corners, and stood in his corner, perfectly still. Kaelen bounced on the balls of his feet, trying to maintain his intimidating aura, but the profound, unnerving calm of his opponent was already beginning to seep under his skin. The bell rang, and the explosion was immediate. Kaelen charged across the mat like a runaway bull, unleashing a furious combination of sledgehammer fists. But he was punching at a ghost. Seagal didn't retreat. He flowed. With minimal, almost imperceptible shifts of his feet and torso, he slipped past every strike. Kaelen's massive punches, each thrown with knockout intent, sliced through empty air. The giant snarled in frustration, pressing forward, but Seagal used his momentum against him. A slight touch here, a subtle redirection there, and Kaelen found himself stumbling off balance. His raw power turned into clumsy liability. The first round ended with Kaelen breathing heavily, having landed nothing, while Seagal's expression remained as placid as a frozen lake. In the second round, Kaelen's frustration mounted. He became more reckless, throwing wild, looping hooks, trying to corner the elusive master. This was the opening Seagal was waiting for. As Kaelen lunged forward with a haymaker, Seagal moved inside the arc of the punch, not blocking it but joining its energy. With a fluid turn of his hips and a wrist control that seemed impossibly gentle, he redirected Kaelen's entire 280-pound frame. The giant was lifted from his feet in a clean, effortless throw, crashing to the canvas with a resounding boom that shook the octagon. The crowd gasped as one, then erupted. For the first time, Kaelen looked not just angry, but confused. The laws of physics, as he understood them, had just been rewritten. The third round was the story of a dying storm. Kaelen's movements were slower, his punches telegraphed. Exhaustion and doubt were a heavy cloak on his shoulders. He was a powerhouse running on empty. Seagal, meanwhile, had barely broken a sweat. He remained a calm center, easily avoiding Kaelen's desperate, sluggish attacks. He never launched a significant offensive strike of his own. He didn't need to. The lesson was in the defense, in the demonstration of control. When the final bell rang, the outcome was spiritually undeniable, even if Seagal had inflicted little physical damage. The judges, under pressure from the promoters to protect their star attraction, controversially declared the fight a draw. The crowd booed the decision, knowing what they had witnessed. Kaelen sat on his stool, his head in his hands, the image of invincibility shattered. Before leaving the cage, Seagal walked over to the dejected giant. Kaelen looked up, his eyes filled with a storm of emotions. Rage, shame, and a flicker of genuine bewilderment. "You could have finished me," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "You could have broken my arm on that throw." Why didn't you? Seagal looked down at him, not with pity, but with a calm, paternal authority. Because the fight was never about destroying you, he said, his voice quiet but clear. It was about teaching you. Power without control destroys itself. That is all you needed to see. The words landed harder than any punch. The lesson was complete. That night, a fight became a fable. It demonstrated that true strength isn't measured by the force of your impact, but by your ability to withstand a storm without breaking. It was a powerful, modern-day parable about arrogance and humility, noise and silence. In a world that screams for attention, a quiet master proved that the most profound power is the one that is held in reserve, the one that seeks to control itself, not conquer others. Have you ever underestimated someone based on their age or their quiet demeanor? What would you have thought if you were in that crowd, watching raw power being so effortlessly dismantled by pure technique? In an era that celebrates loud personalities and explosive results, do you think there is still a place for the kind of silent, patient strength that Steven Seagal represents? What does true mastery really mean to you? If this story reminded you that wisdom and experience are timeless weapons, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about legends who refuse to be forgotten. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the calmest person in the room is often the most powerful. We read and respect every single comment, and we want to hear your take on this incredible showdown. More stories about unexpected triumphs and the clash of generations are waiting for you on your screen. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves true legends never fade. They just find new ways to teach.